a lot on this tool, which is quite promising. Thanks. So that's also a very interesting use case. I think the first two we saw with WFP and their tool, the Deep, and this one. I mean, clearly it is not something that the UNDAC members in the field will be sort of playing with directly, but it's just to say that there is a whole network of partners that are working on very advanced tools through AI, and this is something that is going to be benefiting us directly. So I wanted to give another perspective also a bit closer to what we could do, in terms of our reporting. And I think, Kenny, you mentioned a little bit putting some reports together and getting the analysis. So I've asked our colleagues, and really thanks for that, Marc, who is based in Panama. He's a public information officer with the UNOCHA, and wanted to see a bit with him how we can actually use those tools in what we do in the field in terms of information management, communication with the partners. So he's going to show us a little bit what he's been doing on his side, so Marc brings with him a deep expertise in humanitarian communication and regional coordination around the topic. He will share insight on how AI is being used to enhance situational awareness and public information in disaster-prone regions and in his day-to-day work. So thanks again, Marc, for joining. It's early in the Americas. I'll hand over the screen to you.
Hi, good morning. Oh, excuse me. Good afternoon, colleagues. Just confirming that you can see my presentation and hear me well.
Yeah, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay. 1 second. I'd certainly first like to thank my fellow panelists for their insight, and their collective expertise certainly speaks volumes, but it also makes me something of an outlier among you all. I don't work with data innovation or systems research to the level that you all do. I don't have any project to awe you with. I'll be very blunt with you. I'm usually the comms or reporting officer. Usually the comms or reporting officer from afar, pestering you all in the field for photos, updates to help with the sit rep. But I think that my participation here is mostly about trying to take the quantitative that we're eager to use AI with into the realm of the qualitative. And in that regard, I'm always tinkering with AI tools in my day-to-day work, trying to find practical ways to support humanitarian work, mostly improving reporting clarity. But in my other job, not just as a reports officer, but also as public information officer, using much of this information that you were gathering with AI to draft key messages, noon lines for the spokesperson, press releases, social media posts, and all that. Now, that obviously isn't something that really you guys have to worry about in the field, but certainly it helps to understand that all this information ecosystem is certainly related. What happens in the field, what gets reported from the field, may very well eventually make its way to the highest levels, not just in terms of, an end of mission report to Geneva, but as my next slide that I accidentally put up, it might make its way all the way up to the Secretary General. But first things first, and before I even get to why I said that, and I'm sure this all sounds very familiar, and I'm sure this all, I cannot apologize enough if this is all extremely old to everybody, but I feel compelled to just say, as far as reporting, it is a very useful tool, but it is not a substitute for your judgment. And in general, LLMs or otherwise, I think this holds true. The results are only as good as the instructions you provide it, and it will save you time, but it doesn't remove the responsibility. And the reason I say that, this is a photo of the Secretary General sitting in front of a wall of data and maps and infographics during Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas in our region, in the Caribbean. This was back in 2019. Certainly a lot of the AI tools that we have today would have been very beneficial back then. But the point I'm trying to make here is that AI is not briefing the UN Secretary General. You are, right? So that's the first things first. And I'm sure these challenges that you all face when you deploy are all very familiar. You're swamped with raw inputs. You don't have time to polish them, either for dashboards, sit reps, briefings. Information comes from all over the place, and you still have to coordinate. You still have to go to meetings. You still have to conduct field visits, right? So I find it helpful not to think of AI as something to generate more content for you to parse through, but refining how to present curated information. So me first, I first focus on sourcing, prioritizing, and structuring information as it comes to me. AI then helps me turn that into something clear, coherent, and usable and much faster. As I saw Kenny in his presentation earlier made a very good habit, or at least validated my own habit of indicating whether or not I'm using AI in my own presentation. And yes, this is an AI image generated via Google Gemini. And back to my point about the quality of the results, it helps that I'm also a photographer. So I've actually provided very specific details with through things like the focal length, the lens type, the settings, reference photographers for a better result. Now, that's just one manifestation of thinking very carefully about how you want your result to happen, and not just feed it very, very, very loose and raw information. So my workflow, very as simple as I can make it or try and chart it out, is centralize the information. You all already do most of this, at least the very first two steps, right? You centralize your information, whether that's field observations, assessments, meetings, reports, what have you. You prioritize by relevance. So you're probably already doing this without realizing that you're doing it, right? Information on impact and context, gaps and needs, constraints, recommendations. Now, here's where it helps to, or at least it's helped me to better understand how to use AI for a better result. I have to think about the end result first. So I develop a framework for the prompt in terms of structure, style and length, information priority, audience, among many other considerations. And in very few prompts, I ask AI to fit it all within this framework. It gives me a faster turnaround, the messaging is much clearer, and it leaves you probably more time for things related to the mission instead of having to report on the mission. So again, have your end result in mind. What I tend to do is, if a prompt works for me, I tend to save it to a Word Google Doc, and I just continue iterating over time. And my experience has been, the more time I spend on crafting my prompt, yes, having a conversation with it and treating it as an intern, I wholeheartedly echo all those sentiments. But I spend more time on a single prompt, not enough time that it makes it so that why am I even using AI, but I spend a lot of time on single prompts just to get the desired result. So the good news for everybody is that typical UNDAC reporting and mission report sit reps already have a clear structure: situation, sector analysis, key findings, recommendations, etc. And LLMs, as Kenny pointed out, are built on language. So it takes prompts on how to write very well, much more so than just giving it instructions on providing information. And this is especially helpful for providing consistency in reporting, because I'm sure you are all aware, and it has been in your experience, you will receive inputs from several different authors in several different styles, several different preferences. So LLMs are really good at providing consistency to that. And again, you would be surprised at how efficient or how useful it is to ask an LLM or tell an LLM to provide the results in a particular writing style. You can even do this for fun, for yourself, just for amusement. Write this email like a columnist for the New Yorker, or provide me a mission prep list, but if it were written by Shakespeare. Obviously, that's of no use to anybody, but just to illustrate the capacity for LLM to, because of how it's structured, to actually perform that way. So we need to take that and use it to our advantage, right? So I do wish we had more time to go over more distinct examples. So I'm going to cover one very, very extremely generic example to illustrate what you can do with a well-structured process. And I cannot apologize enough for the following slides being so text-heavy. But we'll assume that sources that you might be dealing with on mission will be official government updates, data analysis, something like whatever the amazing deep product that Patrick showcased might be resulting, direct field observations, firsthand accounts from displaced people, meetings and partner reports, and we're assuming that all this information is resulting in pages and pages and emails and signal messages or WhatsApp messages of content, right? And if we have a structure in place, and if we know how we want it to come out, you really don't need to do a whole lot more than provide it with the right prompt. So you have your structure and your format, your style and your length, your information priority, and assuming you've fed it God knows how many pages of text, you can come out with something like the results. I'm not going to read it. I'll leave it on the screen for a few more seconds, and I'm sure I will be sharing this presentation for the materials to be sent after the meeting. But it really doesn't take all that much. You just have to be very, very, very specific with how you want AI to write. Give it the best quality of information possible, and you ask how it to write. So actually, one thing I like doing is providing LLMs with examples of previous works to ask to analyze for structure and tone and base my prompts off of that. So that's a framework like what I was talking about earlier. I think Kenny's initial example of uploading the UNDAC handbook and material is a great starting point. You could really probably upload 2 or 3 end of mission reports to ask it to analyze for structure and then continue writing in that regard. I'm about to share you this is almost a state secret what I'm about to share you as far as I'm concerned. I use this prompt every day, literally every day. And I'm sure some people who might be connected here who work at ROLAC probably can understand that and can understand why. But very short, a clear issue summary, my style, my length, my information priority. I changed certain wildcards like the number of words, the audience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you'd be amazed at just how much work this does. And the great news, especially one thing that I think gets a little bit overlooked, if you specify the language, I'm saying concise professional English, obviously we all work in multilingual environments, you can input any information in any language, here in my region, my country, we speak Spanglish, Spanish and English. So I will take Spanish language references and English references, throw it all into the same prompt, and it will give me everything in English. It's amazing. I'm sure you already know this, but it bears repeating. This last part, that tell me what you cut if needed, is actually super important, simply because it helps me make editorial decisions better. I never take the initial results as the final one. I iterate quite a bit. Especially if I'm asking to synthesize information, because at the end of the day, AI does not replace my judgment. So rather, this actually speeds things along. I don't need to read as much in order to understand what it is that it's synthesizing and leaving out, right? So that's a really helpful tip. Just if you tell your prompts, especially if you're asking to summarize a report, to actually tell you afterwards what it is that they've left out, you'll have a much better idea of how to proceed. And I think this is very basic. We all talked about this, but specifically when providing this sort of information, everyone said can't understand context, has privacy concerns, especially because of some of the very sensitive information that you might be dealing with on deployment, especially as it relates to perhaps operating in politically sensitive environments. If you wouldn't share it outside the mission, don't share it with AI, as far as qualitative writing goes. And that might represent a little bit more work sometimes, but can never be too sure. I imagine each of your organizations has some guidance on which LLMs you can or can't use. I'd also imagine it would be an interesting discussion for uniform UNDAC AI norms during deployment. But yes, at the end of the day, this is something that I think I saw in the surveys. A lot of people mentioned some hesitance over, I think rightfully so. But I hope that some of this has proved useful. I don't know if 10 minutes is enough to really cover or really go into depth to how I use it on a case-by-case basis. And hopefully it's proved useful to some of you who might not be as tasked with reporting as often as I am. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Marc. I think this is extremely useful and interesting to answer your question, and it's also very practical. I think it shows a direct link to what we can do as UNDAC members on the ground. So thanks a lot for presenting that. I think, again, it's a different angle from what we had before and a very useful one. So I realize we are